What's up everybody, Brian here. Welcome to the lab. Thanks for joining me. In today's video, we're going to do a basic Crested Gecko Cage setup video. It's been a few years since I did one of these, so I thought I'd make a quick video, show you guys a basic cage setup, how easy and quick it can be. And at the same time, I picked up a bunch of these Thrive Reptile products. These are sold in big chain pet stores all over the US. I got a bunch of their stuff. I'm going to kind of do a review of those as we go, as well as some other odds and ends things from other companies. That's what we're going to use. Let's get right into it and I'll show you the products we're going to use today to set up our Crested Gecko Cage. Alright guys, so for this video, as you can see, I've got here the ZoomMed 12 by 12 by 18 inch tank. This is the one that I use for a lot of my display, setup, how-to videos, stuff like that. This is the bare minimum size for one adult crested gecko. Most people will opt to go for an 18 by 18 by 24 inch tank. ZoomMed makes one, Exo Terra makes one. They're both great and they're both a better size for your geckos. So a lot of people will go with that. You'll see it a ton in the comments, people saying you can't possibly keep one gecko in this cage. This is the bare minimum size. This is what I use for display and show and all that. So like I said, most people go with the bigger cage, whatever works for you. We're gonna go with this one just for the display. Now, first step, obviously, substrate. That's the first thing you wanna do when you're setting up a Crested Gecko cage. You've gotta pick what substrate you're putting in the bottom. The two main ways to go with this are either paper towels or I prefer cocoa fiber substrate. As you can see, if you've been watching my channel for a while, I'm big on the cocoa fiber substrate. This is the Thrive version that I've got here. I absolutely love it. It's been great. It's a little bit more fibrousy than some of the other brands, but it works great. Works just as good as any of them. Honestly, any brand of cocoa fiber works. I highly recommend this. It looks so much better than paper towels. It holds the humidity. It's just a better option overall. So first things first, you want to take a bunch of this, soak it with water. You guys have seen me do this a bunch of time in my videos. If you don't know how to do it, you just soak the brick in water. It expands, turns real nice and fluffy. That's how you want to do it. And I'm gonna pull the lid off this guy actually. You want to put about 1.5 to 2 inches of substrate in the bottom of your cage. So you just put some in there, even it around. I'm going to do just a bit more. Make it nice and even, and then I like to pack it down a little bit so it's not too loose. Now, like I said, the best part about this stuff is it will hold the moisture. So it helps your geckos stay humid. They like it like that. It holds that humidity, makes it much easier to regulate your humidity. And the geckos also like to dig. A lot of times people freak out and they send me messages saying, hey, my gecko disappeared, it got out of its tank, and I tell them, no, check in the substrate. Especially if you have moss on top of the substrate like we're about to do, your gecko will dig under that moss and chill down in there. They can do this when they're a little too dry and they want more humidity, or they can do this when they get too hot because it tends to be cooler down in there. So that's a good another reason to have a nice, good, thick substrate like this. Keeps your geckos happy. Now, while you can certainly call this finished as far as flooring goes, a lot of people like to make their cage look a little better, more decorative, and it also helps humidity even further if you add moss. Now, you can get all kinds of dried moss, peat moss, sphagnum moss, all kinds of stuff. I picked up the Thrive Tropical Decorating Kit here. I think it has 5 different types of moss in it, as well as a Mossy Vine. So I am going to open this up and we can have a look at what comes in this kit, and we're going to use this to add a little bit of decoration and a little bit of better looks to our cage. So let's go ahead and peel the wrapper off this guy. Now right away you can see those bright green mosses. How beautiful is that? It looks so much better in the cage than the dark cocoa fiber. The cocoa fiber obviously looks so much better than paper towels already, but when you add in this moss, look how pretty these are. Just bright green, absolutely beautiful. Now the best thing to do with these, I've got a bowl of water here. You just want to soak these pieces of moss in water for just a second. They'll soak up a lot of that water and kind of spring back to life. And these actually, I'm pretty surprised. When I saw this kit, I thought it was probably a ripoff. I think it was $30 I paid for this. and I thought it was expensive for a couple little pieces of moss, and it's way cheaper to piece it together yourself. But if you look at this thing unfolds into actually a pretty good sized piece. So I'm not even sure we're going to use this whole thing on this cage. And it looks like this kit would cover an even larger cage than we've got here. But I'm just going to soak it in this water I've got here. And then you can see once you soak it in the water, it's nice and wet. And you just lay it down as a rough blanket in your cage. The best thing about this stuff that I like, it smells fantastic. Now this is all the sphagnum moss, this bright green stuff. Unroll this, and it just, much like the cocoa fiber, it doesn't expand like the cocoa fiber does when you soak it with water, but it does soak up a lot of the water and kind of puff up and almost come back to life. In fact, some mosses, if you soak them with water and you're able to keep your cage wet enough, the moss can actually come back to life and will grow inside your cage and expand. So if you don't have enough moss to cover the whole floor, that's a good way. If you keep it wet enough, the moss will actually come back to life and grow. Now this here, I threw the paper on the floor, so I don't know what kind of moss this is. So let's go ahead and throw a little bit of this in. Again, I'm going to soak it with water just so it's nice and wet, and this one doesn't hold nearly as much. But we'll put a little of it back in this back corner just for a bit of a different view. Interesting. I wonder what this one is called. I really shouldn't have thrown that thing on the floor, or I could tell you guys. I'll put some text up and tell you what these mosses are called. Very different mosses. I don't see... Oh, here's the vine. And as you can see here, this is the moss-covered vine. I have another one of these. Same company, the Thrive Mossy Covered Vine. You get one in the decorating kit, so that's really nice too. This decorating kit is actually a much better value than I thought it was. So I'm going to set this vine aside and we'll use that here in a few minutes. But I'm going to add this last piece of green moss to the back of the cage there, and we'll end up covering the whole floor with this nice, beautiful moss. Now this is kind of a halfway step between a real basic setup like I did in my first video a few years ago with just some substrate and some fake plants, and going all out on a living vivarium, which eventually I am going to do a vivarium build video. I've got most of the supplies I want for it. I just haven't done it yet. But this is a good in-between point if you don't want to deal with an entire vivarium and everything that goes into putting that together. You can get some of this moss and do the cocoa fiber flooring. And whatever this moss is, we're going to throw this in there too. Why not? Why not? Maybe in this other corner. We'll scooch this guy down. Put this moss in that corner. Sprinkle a little bit of it around in the front. And as you can see already, it's that simple. You just soak a little bit of this moss in water, put it down, and it makes for such a better looking cage. It's just so much more presentable. It looks better. It's beautiful, bright green. And as long as you keep it moist, it'll keep that green color. All right, now that we got the flooring in our cage and our substrate taken care of, we're going to start adding decorations. Now I've got two different decorations here to give you guys a good idea of what you can use. First up, I've got the Reptile cave. I love these guys. I've featured them in a few videos. Just got a hole in the middle, opens up. You can put some substrate in the middle there. These are great because it gives your gecko a place to hide. And if you're not using a thick layer of substrate that holds humidity like this, if you're going for a drier, thinner substrate or even paper towels, these are a great option for a humid hide. It basically acts like what this whole cage is doing. You fill this with sphagnum moss or cocoa fiber, keep it real wet, and it gives your gecko a place to go and hide, get cooled down, get more humidity, help them shed, all those kinds of things. Plus, it doubles as an egg box. If you're breeding geckos, this is a nice egg box as well. They make bigger versions. This is the smallest one they make. It'll work for an adult gecko, but a bigger version would be even better. But the decoration I'm going to put in this cage today, because it's not a very big cage, like I said, if you're using an 18 by 18 by 24 inch cage, I would use both of these. But since we're just doing the smaller cage today, I'm going to use this guy. It's just a basic reptile decoration I picked up at our local pet store, but I love it because it's got some height, so it gives your geckos places to climb. It'll be a good base to wrap some of those vines around and get some vertical decorations into this cage. And also, as you can see, it's hollow. It's got all kinds of little nooks and crannies, which is great for your geckos because they want places to hide. They want places to go feel comfortable. So I'm going to take this guy, and I usually put these towards the back or the middle of the cage. So I'm going to go ahead and set him right about there in the back third of the cage. You can see how good that looks. That decoration, I really like the color scheme on it, the green fake moss on it, the steel gray color of it. It just really appeals to me. I like that a lot. So we're going to throw that in, and then we're going to take our Mossy Vines. And since I've got 2 of these now, since our kit came with one, I am going to take this one and just sort of set it around here. I'm actually going to go through one of the holes on this cage, so it doesn't fill the hole. The geckos can still get in and out of there, but that lets it hold on to there. And then I'm just going to kind of wrap it around that part, wrap it around this one up here, and back down this way, just to give it a little extra texture. Since I have 2 of this vines, this one's not going to go for vertical space. Just wrap it around to give it some more texture and more climbing spaces. Alright guys, now we're going to open up the second Mossy Vine that I bought. I'm pretty sure this is exactly the same as the first one. It's made by the same company, Thrive. But I am going to give you guys a pro tip on how to solve one of the most frustrating issues with these vines. Now, the most frustrating issue with these guys is, as you can see, all you get in this is a vine. And this is great. Like, you're thinking, my gecko can climb on this. It'll help me utilize all this vertical space in the cage. How perfect. And then you realize, how am I going to hang it up? Because, I mean, it won't stay. Of course it won't stay. And they don't give you anything to put it up. It's ridiculous. What are you supposed to do with this when you can't hang it? It's a vine. It's supposed to be vertical. What are you going to do? Now, there's a few more creative solutions. I've seen a lot of people will take your lid and then they'll widen the holes on the screen and put zip ties in it and zip tie the vine to the lid so it hangs down. That works. It obviously doesn't work that. It works great. It doesn't look great. And some people will take suction cups. You can get suction cups with little hooks on them or little rings and suction cup those to the side and use that to wind your vine around. It works pretty good, but eventually the suction cups are going to fall off. You're going to get water spots on your cage. They won't last forever. Some brands of vines even come with suction cups, but you get the same issue. The other way to go is to get like some sort of sticky, like the 3M sticky things, put those on there and use that to hold your vine up. Again, it works, but it's not a great solution. They can fall off. They don't like when they get wet when you spray the cage. God forbid they fall off, but the sticky part stays on and then your gecko gets stuck to it. All kinds of issues can come up. So I'm going to show you guys the pro hack. Now, I will be completely honest, this is not the cheapest solution, but it is by far, I have found, the best solution, and that is to get the Pangea Acrylic Mini Food Ledge. I love these things. This is what I would use in here for a food and water dish anyways. I'll show you real quick how they work. Obviously, you put the food ledge on the inside, and then you've got your magnets. Now, I say this every time I show you guys one of these. You do not want to drop the magnet on because it can crack the glass. You put the magnet down to the side and slide it up into place, and it will hold your food ledge right in place. You can adjust it a little bit to get it perfectly level, however you want. That's great. It's got one hole for food, one hole for water. But the trick that I've found is you get 2 of these guys. Now, like I said, it's not the best solution because they are a little bit expensive. These are $16, which frankly is kind of outrageous for a tiny piece of acrylic. I know acrylic's expensive, but they're pretty pricey and they really shouldn't be that pricey. But that being said, they are worth it because what I like to do is I put them kind of catty corner in the cage, and then I've got one food here and one water over here, and the other 2 holes I use to hold my vines up. It works great because these are never going to fall down. They're never going to get dirty and come unattached like suction cups. They're never going to get wet and fall off like stickies. You don't have to try and destroy your screen lid with any sort of zip ties. And it also makes just a convenient little highway for your geckos to get right to their food dish. I mean, it makes it so easy. Every once in a while when your gecko is shedding, they can have issues. Everybody's seen their geckos have issues climbing. Their feet can get not so sticky. They can't stick to glass. So if you have an elevated food dish and your gecko is shedding or has issues, it's got food on its feet, anything, and it can't climb, it can't get to its food. So if you do it this way, that solves that problem. It not only lets you utilize all of this vertical space, but it also makes sure your geckos can always get to their food. Now check this out. I just wrap it around each one a couple times. Bend those back on each other. Look at that. Look how much of that vertical space that vine takes up now. Just because now it's tied to both sides, this entire vine is off the ground. You don't need the ground to support it, and it fills that vertical space. That's the hardest part of making a Crested Gecko cage, is they're so vertically oriented that you have to fill that vertical space. Otherwise you're wasting half the cage, and you might as well just keep them in a cage that's only 8 inches tall. It's the same thing if they can't use the height. So that is the best way I've found to hang vines, and it looks good, and you've got food and water dishes. I love it. Now the last thing we're gonna do here, I've got this, just a basic Reptile fern. These are not great. I mean, they're kind of cheap and they're not good for climbing. I mostly use these for coverage, and it just gives your gecko somewhere else to hide and some other way to feel secure in his cage. This one comes with one suction cup, and these tend to have the same issues that the vines do with their suction cups, is they just don't last very long, but there's only so much you can do, and if it falls off, it falls off. Not the end of the world. It'll still mostly stay in place. I just like to put something like that in there. Fills up that space a little bit better, and it gives them a good spot to hide in the back here. If they want to get out of sight, out of mind, they can fit themselves in there, and they just feel more secure. That's the key, is if your gecko feels like he's in a small space, that's what they want when they're resting. In most cases, they like to have an option for a secure place to hide. And as you can see in this cage, he's got all kinds of hides in and out of his decoration here. He can go on the glass behind here. He can come in the back behind it here. He's got lots of places to feel secure and safe. Perfect setup. This is what you want. And it's that easy. I think this whole thing, cage and all the decorations and the 2 food dishes, cost me about $200, $220, somewhere in that range, which is quite a bit. But you got to remember, that's a one-time setup fee. Your gecko, if you set up a good cage, especially if you get the slightly larger version, they'll live in there for the rest of their lives. These guys can live 20 to 25 years if you take care of them right. And if you think about that, compare it to a cat or a dog or a pig or whatever animal you guys have at home. $225, $250, even $300 for a good cage setup, and that's where your pet lives for 20 years. That's cheap. That's cheaper than anything you're gonna have to do for a cat or dog. It sounds like a lot, but it's really not, and it's important to get a proper setup to keep your gecko healthy so they live a long, productive life. That's it, guys. That's all I got for you. We'll throw the lid back on here. That is my basic Crested Gecko cage. This one's kind of, like I said, a step up from the cage I did a couple years ago, and soon I'm going to do a full living vivarium to give you an even bigger step up on a nicer, fancier cage you can do. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope this helped you out. Links in the description down below on all of this stuff or similar items. I don't know if I'll find these ones online to link to you guys, but if I can't, I'll link something very, very similar so you guys can shop down below and check out all of these things, help you get a cage set up for yourself and your gecko. Any questions, as always, in the comments. I'll try and get back to you if I can. Thank you very much. Brian Butler, Altitude Exotics /AE Geckos on Facebook and Instagram. Have a good one, guys. Thanks.